This girl is really bold. She hasn't even dated before, but as soon as she meets a man, she harasses him. In the summer in B City, the sun was shining mercilessly in the sky. When Liuruyan got out of the air-conditioned car with her waist bent, she thought for a moment that she had entered a furnace. Her eyes hurt from the strong light. Liuruyan put her hand on her forehead to cover the upper half of her face. After whispering to the driver not to wait for her, she closed the car door with her backhand and trotted into a building in front of her. After bypassing the revolving door, the security guard at the door saw her and greeted her with a smile. Second Mississippi. Liuruyan took her hands off her head, the hair on her forehead was wet with sweat and clung to her skin in a slightly embarrassed manner. She ran over all the way, still out of breath, when she spoke. "Where's my sister?" "The boss is in the office." She responded and looked around to find the direction of the elevator. With her sharp eyes, she spotted a person who had just entered the elevator and reached out to press the door button. Liuruyan was too lazy to wait any longer, so she said, "Hey," and ran towards the elevator. The two were not far apart. The people in the elevator heard her voice and looked up to see the girl trotting this way. They released their fingers from pressing the door close button and kindly pressed the door open button twice. As Liuruyan ran, she saw the elevator door was half closed and then opened. She ran over, panting slightly, and prepared to enter the elevator. She raised her head to thank the person who helped press the button. When her eyes fell on the man's face, she was stunned. The man had given up his seat in a gentlemanly manner. Seeing that she was still not coming in, he looked up and said, "Aren't you coming in?" "Thank you." "You're welcome," the man said as he pressed the door button sideways. After pressing the door button, he stepped back and leaned against the elevator wall to play with his mobile phone. Liuruyan stood a little in front of him to his right. From her angle, she could see the man's high nose and light pink lips. His eyes were drooped because he was looking at his mobile phone, and his thick eyelashes created a beautiful semicircle under his eyes. Liuruyan swallowed silently and looked away. The elevator door was made up of 2 full-length mirrors. From the 2 mirrors, Liuruyan could easily see that the man seemed to be more than 2 heads taller than him. He was still half leaning against the wall, standing by himself. When straight. 3 heads. The man seemed to notice that Liuruyan was secretly looking at him. His eyes fell from the phone to the elevator door, and met Liuruyan's eyes in the mirror. Just when Liuruyan was about to look away in panic because he was caught peeping. A second ago, the man put away his phone and asked, "Do you want an autograph?" Liuruyan said. She quickly shook her head and waved her hand in embarrassment, saying no. The man didn't respond much. "Oh." After saying this, he lowered his head to look at the phone again. While Liuruyan wondered why the sound was so nice, she remembered that she hadn't pressed down on the stairs yet. When his eyes fell on the elevator button, he realized that this man was on the same floor as him, the 46th floor. Her sister's office is on the 46th floor, and she even expanded her office to the entire floor in an exaggerated manner. So there was no one else on this floor except herself and her personal assistant. Liuruyan knew clearly that this person should be an artist under her sister's banner, and he was even very famous. After all, the tone in which he had just asked her if she wanted an autograph was very natural, not pretentious, neither arrogant nor humble, and mixed with politeness. With a hint of confidence, he casually pulled off half of his earphones, which looked particularly handsome. Liuruyan's heart skipped a beat, feeling a little pity. She has been abroad for the past few years and has no understanding of the domestic entertainment industry. But based on the appearance of the person in front of him, even if he is not popular now, he will be popular sooner or later. It was so beautiful, so outstanding that when she saw this face for the first time, she couldn't help but be stunned. She had been influenced by her family environment over the years, and she had seen hundreds of handsome guys, and this guy stood out. Even after briefly looking at each other in the mirror, her heartbeat was still very fast. Liuruyan calmly classified her reaction as lust. She continued to look at him in the mirror, her heartbeat not slowing down, and she even began to think about whether it was impolite to ask an artist's name. Liuruyan thought about it for a moment, then took out her mobile phone, found her sister's WeChat account, and was about to tell her sister, "I fell in love at first sight with the most handsome male artist in your company in the elevator of your company." Halfway through the sentence, the two of them, the elevator that was carrying the two of them rising slowly under their feet, suddenly stopped suddenly without warning. Liuruyan almost threw her cell phone out and leaned against the elevator wall in panic. The next second, the feeling of weightlessness caused by the elevator suddenly disappeared, and the elevator stopped. The light cord in the elevator seemed to be burned out, flickering on and off. The floor sign points to the 30th floor. It's not there yet. It should be stuck between two floors. The two people looked at each other quickly. Liuruyan swallowed his saliva and asked uncertainly, "Is the elevator stopped?" Ji Boda frowned, nodded, put away his phone and stood up straight. Stepped forward 2 steps lightly, pressed the alarm button, and with a sense of self-rescue, pressed the door opening button of every floor below the 30th floor. He turned around and saw the person staring at him with wide eyes. His expression was quite calm, and he told her concisely, "It's malfunctioned. Wait, someone should come to fix it." Liuruyan's heart began to accelerate uncontrollably from the moment she realized that the elevator had stopped in midair. Her body was numb due to the sudden fear. When she heard the words, she nodded quickly and forced herself to calm down. "Okay." Ji Boda said again, "Take off your shoes." Liuruyan blinked and did not react. If the elevator descends rapidly before someone comes, you will be more vulnerable to trauma while wearing high heels. He explained to her in a few words, picked the nearest elevator wall, walked over, and clung to it. In fact, Liuruyan's heels were not high, just a few centimeters small square heels, but she quickly took them off, then imitated the man and pressed her body tightly against the wall. Ji Boda looked at her in surprise. Liuruyan noticed it and explained in a low voice, "I think you seem to be more aware of self-rescue." Ji Boda said, and said nothing more. The two people were facing each other against the wall, and no one spoke. Ji Boda took out his cell phone and took a look at it. As expected, there was no signal. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, the elevator didn't move and no one came. He frowned and pressed the alarm button again. Liuruyan's legs began to feel weak, and her fingers unconsciously touched her bag, and suddenly touched a round and large piece. She was stunned, remembered what it was, and quickly took it out. There were 2 bottles of Yakult. She did not hesitate and handed one to Ji Boda generously. "Here." Ji Boda was stunned and refused, "No need." Take it." Liuruyan gently took a small step forward and held it closer. It was reasonable and well-founded. Drinking can make people less afraid temporarily. Ji Boda was silent for a moment and then said, "Thank you." He held it in his hand, but did not drink. Liuruyan rubbed it back again, opened the lid, and took 2 sips. The sweet and greasy taste explodes on the tip of the tongue, and it does have some effect, but only at the moment of entry. Liuruyan was a little frustrated. It would be better if she brought a bottle of wine. After a bottle of Yakult, still no one came. When Ji Boda pressed the alarm button for the 3rd time, her voice began to tremble. "Is it that no one is coming? The two of them stayed here for a long time. I wonder if it was a psychological effect." Liuruyan felt that she had begun to have difficulty breathing. Ji Boda returned to his original position and said, "There will be." His eyes fell on the large number of elevator buttons that he pressed, and he paused, and his tone was very calm. "Even if no one comes, there are still 30 chances to be rescued." "How long?" Ji Boda raised his wrist and looked at his watch. 9 minutes. Liuruyan closed her eyes. She was really scared. This feeling of fear of stepping on the line of death makes people tremble every second and drives people crazy. Days passed like years, and she finally understood it today. She even began to think uncontrollably about how she would die if the elevator slipped. So she tried to divert her attention. Licking her dry lips, Liuruyan decided to break the dull silence in the elevator. She spoke in a trembling voice, "How about we talk?" Ji Boda wanted to remind her that talking would consume oxygen faster, but she raised her head when he noticed that the ends of the girl's eyes were already red. He was silent for a moment and nodded. Liuruyan chose the most commonly used opening line, "Hello, my name is Liuruyan." "Hello. This year is the 21st. To tell you the truth, Before today, I was optimistic. I think I can live to be 99. My dream is to be a great physicist. My hobby is reading novels, preferably BL ones, where two little boys are passionately in love. That kind of thing, I think, is very exciting. She was talking nonsense, saying whatever came to her mind. She felt that she didn't know whether she could be saved today, and she was pretentiously paying attention to some privacy. It was difficult for Ji Boda to interrupt, but he always responded to her with good-natured, oh and, It wasn't until Liuruyan talked about the origin of his Alipay password that the man turned his face politely. Liuruyan felt that he might not like to hear this, so he had to change the topic. I'm here because my sister made 108 phone calls and asked me to come back to participate in a talent show called Dream Chasing. Ji Boda raised his eyes instantly. The girl continued to complain, out of love for her, I came back, and now I have been here for more than 10 minutes. If I could go back in time, I would definitely give me the first call when she went on the phone, delete and block contacts. After saying that, after waiting for a while, without waiting for the man's response, Liuruyan sniffed and looked at him. The man was also looking at her. The lights in the elevator were dim, and Liuruyan failed to notice the emotion in his eyes. Only noticed the man's slender eyes, light brown pupils, and elegant eyebrows. She swallowed her saliva. You are so beautiful. Liuruyan looked into his eyes. The gray light made people confused. She felt heartbroken, thinking that the person should die a worthy death, so she touched her mouth, closed her eyes and blurted out, I haven't been in love yet. Can you kiss me? I want to feel the taste of kissing before I die. Ji Boda looked at her suddenly, a little in disbelief. I want to make sure that the words I just said were indeed spoken by the little girl who likes to drink Yakult in front of me and not my own auditory hallucination. The little girl who was less than 1 meter away from him, because she was too short, had to raise her neck to look at him. This action, inexplicably, had the smell of stubbornly looking at death. He always controlled his expression. In fact, the shock in his expression was not obvious, but he was obviously noticed by the little girl in front of him. Her expression was a little embarrassed for a moment, and the corners of her eyes turned redder, but she didn't cry. It was as if she didn't dare to look at him anymore. She lowered her head, and after a long while, she asked in a low and aggrieved voice, can't you? Ji Boda was speechless. It's rare that he doesn't know how to reply to someone. There was even a moment in my mind where I was thinking that at times like this, kissing didn't seem to be impossible. But as soon as this thought came up, he suppressed it. He rubbed his forehead helplessly, feeling a little headache. Just as he was thinking about whether there was any way to appease the little girl and get rid of this problem, the next second, Liuruyan, who had been clinging to the wall opposite the door, suddenly stepped forward and crossed over to him. Ji Boda was surprised. He raised his eyebrows, but before he could say anything, Liuruyan pressed his shoulders directly, stood on tiptoes, and pressed her lips against his. Ji Boda was stunned, and his eyes met those very close eyes. The girl's eyes flashed with panic, and the next second she closed them tightly as if to escape, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly in front of his eyes. The man's Adam's apple rolled up and down in a circle. I have to admit, it feels wonderful on the mouth. Probably in the face of a sudden death test, everyone's moral bottom line will be indulged. Ji Boda frowned, and finally lowered his hand that wanted to push people, silently allowing her to bite him and do whatever he wanted. In the air that was already scarce in oxygen, breathing seemed to become more difficult because of the kiss. The sweat of the two people mixed with Liuruyan's tears, leaving a astringent and slightly bitter feeling between their lips that were tightly touching each other. Liuruyan didn't lie, she really didn't know how to kiss. For a long time, the two of them were just like this, with dry mouths touching each other. The person who was kissing by force only moved occasionally to bite the person being kissed. Doing nothing. However, the girl's breath was sweet, with a light milky aroma of peach, drifting into Ji Boda's nose. Liuruyan didn't realize anything was wrong with her kissing method. She closed her eyes and her heart beat like a drum. Breathing became increasingly difficult due to lack of oxygen, and she even suspected that she would die in the next second. Men's breath smells good, no tobacco smell, very clean. She kissed him and closed her eyes. The tears that had been suppressed for a long time finally burst out silently. She even began to wait for death quietly. The long kiss lasted for about a few minutes. Just before the man couldn't bear it anymore and almost reached out his big hand to clasp the head of the person in front of him and take over the initiative to kiss, the security guard suddenly heard a voice above the two of them, "Hey! It's inside. People. Can you hear me?" Liuruyan opened her eyes suddenly. The two looked at each other and saw hope in each other's eyes. Ji Boda stepped back slightly, separated their lips, and shouted loudly to the security guard above, "You can hear me. Hey! Don't be afraid. Our maintenance workers were already there. We'll rescue you right away. Don't be afraid. Okay." The security guard was still shouting something outside, probably wanting to help ease their tension. Ji Boda looked down at the little girl lying on him, raised his hand to help her wipe away a tear that flowed to her face, and smiled, "We are rescued." Liuruyan laughed through tears. The rescue time lasted for more than a minute. When the elevator door was opened and light finally shone into the field of vision again, Liuruyan's legs softened and she stumbled, and someone grabbed her arm from behind. She was stunned and looked at the person holding her up. The man had put on a mask at some point. The black mask covered most of his face, leaving only a pair of eyes hanging outside, looking at her. Liuruyan opened her mouth and was about to say thank you when she was suddenly pulled out of the elevator by a force. The next second, she was hugged fiercely. It's her sister. She was so frightened that her whole body was shaking. While holding her, tears flowed down her neck and into her clothes, which hurt and felt hot. Liuruyan also wanted to cry. She walked at the gate of the King of Hell's palace, and now she was holding her sister in her arms, and all her fears came up together. But her sister was crying too hard. She was usually a vigorous and resolute person, but now she threw away all the idle baggage and hugged her and cried earth-shatteringly. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she could only pat her back to comfort her. In the peripheral vision, a thin figure walked past. Liuruyan hugged her sister and stared at the man's back unconsciously. Thinking of what happened in the elevator just now, her face felt a little hot. The girl patted her out-of-breath sister, who was crying, "Sister. Show me the information about the male actors in your company?" One day later, Liuruyan sat in her sister's office, looking defeated. She couldn't find that person's information. Just as he was leaning on his chin, feeling a little regretful, Liuning walked all the way on high heels, spreading his hands on the table in front of Liuruyan, with a look of helplessness on his face. "I said, little ancestor, we will go to the competition in 2 days, are you ready for a while?" Liuruyan looked up at her sister listlessly, "Ang. Tsk, don't make me look like you're trying to get into trouble, I'll let you pick up the numbers, and you'll give up until you're eliminated in the first round. Isn't it done when you come back?" The girl leaned on her forehead and continued listlessly, and said languidly, "It's done." Optimistic point of view, internal news, the chief instructor invited by the organizer this time is very handsome, let's go see the handsome guy. Liuruyan said, "Oh," obviously not because of the handsome guy in her sister's mouth, she was not very interested in the upcoming game. The girl was a little out of her mind. After all, she felt that no matter how handsome the tutor was, he would definitely not be as handsome as the unlucky little guy she had taken advantage of in the elevator yesterday. Tsk. How could I see him again?